Stephen, what got you interested in photography? We know you began photographing images at such a young age.
Well, I don't really know how it happened. I remember being about 10 years old and having a little brownie camera and taking pictures and developing the negatives in a little tiny dark room and making little contact prints about that big. And I don't really know how it happened, but it's cameras and the idea of photography basically stayed with me through, a long life, a business career, all kinds of things. So it's what I love to do, so I do it.
I'm sure you got a little inspiration from your dad, who worked for Time magazine, right?
Well, Time Incorporated, he was actually the first US distributor for the BBC in America at Time Inc., but for some reason, he brought home monographs, books about photographers, many of them Time Life photographers, Life magazine photographers. So I was exposed to all that stuff, and I think a lot of it interested me, and I think a lot of it stuck in terms of learning about what makes a good photograph.
Mm-hmm. How do you get your motivation?
Well, when you go, everywhere you go, if you have a camera with you, there are things that just confront you that you see and you say, oh, that's interesting. And you take a few frames. Sometimes you have an idea of something you want to explore. And so I do that too. But the net of it is the work that gets finished turns out to be the work that appeals to me, that I think is interesting. Because if I don't, then I go, and I don't work on it. And so that probably means that most of my work has an attribute of peacefulness, of quiet, of relaxation, because that's what I like in photographs.
Yeah.
I suppose that, there's somewhere in there's a social or political aspect, but really what I love to do is find ways to reveal things about the natural world that people wouldn't otherwise see.
Yeah, and most of your work is based in nature, so I imagine you do either a lot of hiking or a lot of traveling.
Well, the serious work with photography really began through many years as a backpacker, particularly in the Sierras, the Rockies, and other places. Other times, we've traveled around the world, but tourist locations, to my mind, are not often, the greatest source for interesting images. It's fun to take pictures of other people in tourist locations, but that's not typically what I finish and show.
Yeah, and your work is well finished, meaning it's well constructed. I mean, there's a lot more to creating it's not just snap and shoot and then send it to somebody and have it digitally printed, right? I mean,
right.
The framing you're using and the process, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And
when I started exhibiting in galleries, my first photographs was a series of black and white botanicals, and they were framed in classic black gallery frames with a 4-inch white mat and behind glass, and they looked very good. But the reflections bothered me, and frankly, the mats bothered me. So I began to think about how could I not use glass and not bother with the mats that just make the image smaller relative to the frame. So over time, I developed the technique that I use now, which basically does not require glass. It starts with a print. You've seen, this is an image that's in the gallery. But you can see how the image literally floats inside the maple frame.
Yep.
Right? And so I start with a fine art print. And then the first thing that happens is the print gets coated with 3 coats of a water-based polymer. And I have a sample that I think you can see this. But you see one side is sort of gray. This side is sort of dull and lifeless.
Yeah.
The other side has much more contrast, much more color. So the side by my hand has had the coating put on. And so it really brings the images to light.
Yeah, it does.
Does.
And then the print gets laminated to mat board. The mat board gets laminated to a slightly smaller piece of gator foam, and then all of that gets mounted into the frame. So here's another smaller image. And here you can see the back.
Yeah.
How it's all mounted. And here you can see how all the layers are actually stacked together.
Yeah, it's
So
a lot of.
it's a lot of work, but one of my goals was I wanted a process that I could do myself. I've got a lovely studio, I've got time, and so I really enjoy taking an image from the camera through the computer, through the printer, and then into the final finishing process to where it's ready to hang.
Well, they're beautiful images, and the viewers can see a lot more of your work on our site and get in touch with you directly. I can't wait to get back to Santa Fe.
Oh, I can't wait either. That's where we got introduced, and it's now seeming like a long time ago, but 2019. But I'll be here when you're here, I promise.
All right, Stephen. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
You
You too.
too. Have a good night.